Welcome to Whispered Clues. Tonight, a brilliant mind unravels a chilling secret in Sherlock Holmes and the Whisper in the Schoolyard. A shadow lingers where innocence should play. A faint whisper hints at long-buried truths. Will you hear it before Holmes does? Pour yourself a cup, draw the curtains, and let the mystery begin. A soft tapping at the window, irregular, almost apologetic, drew my attention away from the morning newspaper. Holmes did not stir. He sat motionless in his chair, head bent toward the dying embers, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The faint sound came again, tap-pause, tap-tap, as though performed by some nervous messenger, uncertain of his reception. The London fog pressed dimly against the glass, and through its film I discerned a blurred outline, the shape of a boy. Holmes spoke without looking up. "You will find, Watson, that our visitor has taken great pains to avoid the front door." I rose, lifted the latch, and the window yielded inward with a sigh of damp air. A thin, pale-faced boy, scarcely 14, stood upon the sill, cap in hand, his knees dusted white with chalk. "Please, sir," he whispered. "Mr. Holmes, are you Mr. Holmes?" Holmes's eyes opened. "That depends upon the importance of your whisper," he said quietly. The boy clambered inside, clutching his satchel as if it contained a beating heart. His boots left prints of playground dust upon the carpet. I recognized the faint sound that accompanied his movements, the rhythmic squeak of a schoolyard swing in need of oil. It came, I later realized, from the little bell affixed to his satchel buckle. The sound would follow us throughout the case, like a child's half-remembered song. "I didn't mean to climb up, sir," the boy stammered. "They told me not to tell anyone, but she said you'd listen." "She," Holmes prompted. The boy's gaze darted toward the window as if afraid the fog might overhear. "Miss Carter teaches writing at the Newgate Preparatory." "She." His voice failed, replaced by a tremor of breath. Holmes motioned him to the chair opposite. "Begin again," he said, "but this time, as you would to a schoolmaster. Facts first, feelings second." The lad straightened. "It's about the whisper, sir, the one that comes after the bell." I exchanged a glance with Holmes, who inclined his head fractionally. "At morning playtime," the boy continued, "the bell rings, you can hear it all over the yard. Then, just before it stops, there's a whisper. Only it isn't anyone whispering. It's like the bell itself breathes. Miss Carter said it was just the wind, but yesterday she went to see where it came from, and now she's gone." "Gone?" I asked. He nodded, twisting his cap. "Didn't come back after break. They said she went home ill, but her coat's still hanging in the cloakroom, and her purse is in her drawer. And this—" He opened the satchel and drew out a folded scrap of lined paper, the corner smudged with graphite. "I found it under the bell tower rope this morning." Holmes reached for it delicately, as though the mere touch might erase its contents. The handwriting was small, deliberate, and half erased. "The whisper knows who listens." Holmes's nostrils flared faintly. "What is your name, my boy?" "Harold Phipps, sir." "Very good. And you attend Newgate Preparatory?" "Yes, sir." "Describe Miss Carter." "Quiet, sir. Kind. She gave us old poems to copy instead of sums. Said they kept the head straight." Holmes's fingers drummed lightly on the arm of his chair, 3 beats and a pause, matching the earlier tap at the window. "Watson, observe that the chalk upon his trousers is not from the classroom floor. It is the residue of powdered lime used for lining games courts. Therefore, our messenger has been near the yard this very morning. The matter is current, not retrospective." The boy looked astonished. "I ran straight from there, sir." "So I deduced," Holmes said, smiling faintly. "Now, Harold, when the bell rings again tomorrow, will you notice whether the whisper precedes or follows the final stroke?" "It comes after, sir. Always after." Holmes rose abruptly. "Then, Watson, we must prepare ourselves for an education. Fetch your coat. The whisper waits for no man or woman. Within minutes, we were in a hansom rattling eastward through the thinning fog. The rhythmic squeak from the boy's satchel accompanied us like a ghost of playground laughter. Holmes sat silent, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together in that attitude which signified the birth of a theory. "Holmes," I ventured, "you take this whisper seriously." "My dear Watson," he murmured. The human voice, when reduced to its faintest vibration, reveals more truth than any shout. "We shall see whether this one belongs to wind, conscience, or crime." The cab jolted to a stop outside a row of soot-streaked railings. Beyond them rose the stern facade of Newgate Preparatory, its bell tower a black finger against the whitening sky. The faint sound of children reciting drifted from open windows. Holmes paused at the gate, listening. The bell rang once, high and hollow, then, faintly beneath it, a sigh, soft as breath through reeds. Holmes's expression sharpened. "Do you hear it, Watson?" "I do," I admitted. "But surely no assumption," he cut in. "Only observation. The whisper occurs precisely 3 seconds after the bell's final tone. Mark that. The timing is deliberate." We entered the yard. A young matron approached, startled by our presence. Holmes's car disarmed her, and soon we were following her through echoing corridors lined with painted alphabets. The air smelled of chalk and polish. Outside the cloakroom hung a grey coat, still bearing a faint trace of perfume. Beneath it, a satchel lay overturned, its contents ink bottle, ribbons, exercise books neatly untouched. Holmes stooped beside it, eyes narrowing. "Watson, note the ink blot upon the floorboards. It runs against the grain. Meaning? Meaning that the object which caused it was dragged, not dropped. A horizontal movement deliberate, not accidental." From the yard, the bell tolled again. We both paused. This time, the whisper came closer, almost within the walls. A sound like breath drawn through a narrow gap, ending in a half-syllable. Holmes straightened slowly. "Watson," he said, "there is someone speaking from behind that wall." And even as he spoke, the whisper rose once more nearer, clearer, and this time forming a word. A name. The sound lingered in that narrow corridor like the last breath of a dying note. Holmes pressed his hand flat against the wood, eyes half closed. The whisper had formed a name faint, uncertain, yet unmistakably human. I could not catch it, but Holmes's expression told me he had. He leaned closer, ear almost touching the panel. "Watson," he murmured, "help me move this rack of cloaks." We obeyed at once, the matron gasping as the wooden frame slid aside. Behind it lay a section of wall where the plaster bore a hairline crack from skirting to cornice. Holmes traced it with a finger, then withdrew his penknife. The blade slipped between the boards and, with a sharp creak, a portion gave way, revealing a hollow recess no wider than a broom closet. Inside hung a narrow speaking tube, its mouth shaped like a trumpet. Holmes's eyes gleamed. An acoustic conduit. "Watson, the whisper is not supernatural. It is engineered." The boy, Harold, stared. "A speaking pipe? Like in ships?" "Precisely," Holmes replied. "Once used for household communication, but in this instance repurposed to convey fear. Note the dust recently disturbed. Someone has used this within the past hour." He placed his lips near the opening. "Holmes to the bell tower," he said softly. A moment later, through the faint metal echo, we heard our own voices return, distorted, hollow, spectral. Then, beneath the echo, another breath not ours. Holmes stiffened. "There's someone listening at the far end." The matron clutched her keys. Good Lord, who would do such a thing? "Who indeed?" Holmes replied. "Come, Watson. The other end of this conduit will emerge near the source of the sound, the bell tower. That, I suspect, is where Miss Carter vanished." We hurried along the corridor, the boy following close, his satchel bell jingling softly. The motif haunted every step. Squeak, jingle, hush, a child's rhythm turned ominous. Holmes halted at a narrow flight of stairs and motioned for silence. Above us, the great bell loomed behind a grated arch. The whisper came again, fainter now, dissolving into the creak of the rope. Holmes ascended, and we followed. The air grew colder. A hatch opened onto the tower's interior where the bell rope descended through the beams. There, on the dusty floorboards, lay a single glove, slender, grey, and marked with chalk. Holmes lifted it delicately. "Miss Carter's," the matron breathed. "Observe," said Holmes, the smudge upon the thumb. "Graphite, same as the writing on the note." She held a pencil moments before she disappeared. "Watson, shine your lantern there beneath the frame." The beam revealed a faint scuff in the dust, a shoe mark facing away from the stair, as though she had been drawn backward. Holmes crouched, dragged again. But where? He scanned the planks, then rapped them twice with his stick. A hollow sound answered. "A false floor," I said. He smiled. "Not false, my dear fellow, merely selective. See these iron rings? They form a lifting hatch." Together we heaved it open. Beneath lay a narrow crawl space containing a tangle of copper tubes, each leading downward. Holmes touched one gently. It hummed like a tuning fork. "Our whisper's anatomy," he said. "The tubes carry sound from various points, classrooms, corridors, perhaps even offices. Someone has built a network of eavesdropping." The boy's eyes widened. "So they can hear everything we say?" "Everything," Holmes replied grimly, "and choose when to speak back." The matron crossed herself. "But why frighten the children?" Holmes straightened. "Because fear silences truth. Whoever commands the whisper commands obedience." He replaced the hatch and rose, the lines of his face sharpening into resolve. "We shall need access to the school records, the maintenance plans, and Miss Carter's quarters. Watson, accompany Mrs. Ellis here and secure the headmaster's cooperation. I shall remain." I hesitated. "Alone?" He smiled faintly. "Watson, you forget that I have excellent company in the form of an unseen interlocutor. I intend to make him speak." The boy tugged my sleeve. "I'll stay with Mr. Holmes," he offered. Holmes nodded approval. "Good lad. Keep your ears open and your tongue still." As we descended, the bell above gave a sudden, solitary stroke unbidden, unsummoned. The sound reverberated through the stairwell, followed by that soft sigh again, as though the bell itself exhaled regret. I felt an involuntary chill as I followed Mrs. Ellis toward the headmaster's study. The man we found there was pale and heavy-browed, with a voice too mild for his size. "Mr. Holmes is here, is he? I was told of your arrival." His eyes flickered nervously to the window. "A most unfortunate business with Miss Carter. A nervous disposition, I'm afraid. She took leave yesterday. Without her coat, purse, or gloves?" I asked. He blinked. "Strange, yes. The staff say she was troubled by sounds." "Indeed," I said. She believed the bell whispered. He laughed weakly. "Children's fancies infect even grown minds, it seems. The bell mechanism is quite ordinary." I noted a dark stain upon his cuff graphite dust. "Do you use pencils often, headmaster?" He started. "I keep accounts." Before I could press further, a faint cry echoed down the hall Harold's voice. We ran. At the stair foot, the boy stood trembling, pointing upward. "He's gone," he gasped. Mr. Holmes, the floor opened, and we dashed up, breath harsh against the stone. The hatch in the tower gaped open. Holmes was not there. The whisper came again, drawn out like a sigh, through iron Holmes. Holmes, it was his own name echoed back, mournful and cold. I dropped to my knees and peered into the darkness below. A rope swung gently where he had been standing, the bell above moving slightly as if stirred by unseen wind. The sound of the satchel bell still trembled near the edge where the boy had fallen back in fear. "Fetch a lantern," I said hoarsely. When its light reached the crawl space, we saw the glimmer of Holmes's walking stick lying amid the copper tubes with no sign of him. Then, from the depths, came his voice, steady but muffled. "Watson, stay where you are." The floor mechanism, it's his warning, broke into static breath and silence. The whisper rose again, echoing through every pipe, but now it bore a new cadence, faster, deliberate, urgent. It repeated one phrase, over and over, as if mocking our confusion. "The listener knows," Harold clung to my coat. "Who's speaking, Doctor?" I could not answer. For the first time in my long companionship with Holmes, I felt the distinct terror that comes not from what one sees, but from what listens back. And then, faintly from below, came a metallic clang, one clear sound that cut through the whisper like truth through deceit. A signal. The metallic clang resounded once more, then silence. I called into the opening, my voice colliding with the copper tubes and returning distorted. "Holmes, are you hurt?" A pause, then a faint reply. "Quite intact, Watson. There is a passage below, narrow, foul, but traversable. Lower your lantern carefully." With Harold's trembling hands assisting, I secured the light to a cord and sent it down. The flame revealed a shaft barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. Holmes's face appeared at the edge of illumination, calm, resolute, streaked with dust. "Remain there," he said. "I believe our whisper originates from this lower chamber. You will hear me as I proceed." The boy clutched my sleeve. "Sir, you won't let him go alone?" I looked down again, but Holmes had already vanished into the darkness. The faint metallic hum of the copper pipes followed him like a nervous heartbeat. Then came his voice, echoing through the conduit. Watson notes how the sound travels upward. The resonance suggests a metal partition, not stone. This structure was built for concealment. I strained to listen. Every word seemed woven into the same rhythmic pulse as that little bell on Harold's satchel, steady, recurrent, fateful. Holmes spoke again, more distant. "I have reached the lower chamber. It is lit faintly by a single gas jet. There are papers strewn here, Watson, and wait for footsteps." The sound rose through the shaft, a scrape, a hurried breath, then the sudden clang of a door. "Holmes," I cried. His answer came firmly. "Do not descend. The exit is closing from within. Whoever operates this infernal contrivance does so manually, perhaps, through the headmaster's office. Secure him at once." I seized Harold's arm. "Ha! Come with me." We raced down the stairs, the child's bell jingling with each stride. The sound, once eerie, now urged us forward like an alarm. Bursting into the corridor, we found the headmaster emerging from his study, keys in hand, eyes startled. "Dr. Watson, what in heaven's name?" I caught him by the wrist. "You know perfectly well, sir. Where is the mechanism that opens the chamber beneath the tower?" he stammered. "Mechanism? I know nothing of—" The boy stepped forward. "You're lying. You told Miss Carter not to climb the tower, that it was unsafe." The man's expression hardened. Childish nonsense. "Release me." But as he pulled free, I glimpsed a telltale smear of graphite upon his cuff, the same dull grey as Miss Carter's glove. His denial only confirmed what Holmes had suspected. "You will come with us," I said coldly. "Now." He hesitated, then bolted. We pursued him across the hall, our footsteps clattering. The echo multiplied against the tiles until the whole building seemed alive with pursuit. The whisper joined in faint, mocking the same words repeating through every tube. "The listener knows," the headmaster darted into a narrow passage. We followed, and suddenly he turned a wheel embedded in the wall. From somewhere above, We heard the grinding of gears. Holmes's voice, faint but urgent, echoed from the conduit. "Watson!" "He's—" Then came the roar of shifting air, the bell tolling violently as though in pain. The whisper became a shriek, and the pipes trembled. The boy covered his ears. I flung myself at the wheel, forcing it back. Metal screamed. Then abruptly, all fell still except for the faint jingle of Harold's bell. Moments later, a wooden panel in the floor slid aside and Holmes emerged, breathless but uninjured. His coat was torn, his eyes blazing with discovery. "Well done, Watson," he said, "and well done, Master Phipps. You prevented a most premature conclusion to my career." I grasped his arm. "What in the name of sanity is this place?" He straightened, dusting his sleeve. "A network of acoustic traps designed for surveillance and manipulation. Our headmaster here, gesturing toward the man, now cowering against the wall, has been listening to every conversation within his establishment, using these tubes to feign supernatural voices. Miss Carter, it seems, discovered his machinery." The headmaster's lips trembled. "You can prove nothing." Holmes's tone was icy calm. "Indeed? When you sealed the chamber, you forgot one detail. The gas jet. Its residue still clings to your fingertips. It burns faintly blue, just as it does on your right hand. That, combined with the graphite on your cuff and the missing tool from your desk, the narrow wrench now lying beside Miss Carter's glove, forms a chain even you cannot unfasten." The man sagged against the wall. "She threatened to expose me. I only meant to frighten her with just the whisper, the sound through the pipe. But she fell, the floor gave way, Holmes's gaze hardened. And you concealed her beneath that same trapdoor, sealing it with the mechanism you later used against me. The voice you employed to terrify your pupils has, in the end, betrayed you." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Is she gone, sir?" Holmes placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We shall see, my boy. There may yet be mercy in this grim architecture." We followed him back to the tower. With careful turns of the wheel, Holmes reopened the hatch. The copper pipes vibrated faintly, as though exhaling. Beneath, in the dim recess, lay a figure partly covered by a fallen beam. Holmes knelt, checked the pulse, and exhaled. "Alive," he whispered. "Faint, but alive." Harold dropped to his knees beside her. The boy's bell gave a single trembling note before falling still. That small sound, fragile and pure, seemed to suspend the air itself. Holmes looked up at me. "Watson, your medical aid swiftly." Together we lifted Miss Carter into the light. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment. "The whisper," she murmured. "It wasn't the wind, it was him, Rest," I said softly. "You are safe now." Holmes turned toward the headmaster, who stood ashen. "You built your whisper to command fear. But fear, sir, has an echo, and it answers the truth." Outside, the bell tolled once more, not by human hand, but by the motion of the wind itself. The sound descended through the pipes, gentle now, almost kind. Holmes listened, then spoke quietly. "The machinery is still alive, Watson. The question remains, who helped him build it?" Before I could answer, the whisper returned softer, from a different conduit entirely. It spoke a new word, low and unmistakable. "Carter." Holmes's eyes met mine, sharp as flint. "Not she, Watson," someone calling her. Holmes's gaze held mine a moment longer, the words still hanging in the air like smoke. Then, with a sharp motion, he bent toward the nearest tube and placed his ear against its rim. The faint reverberation continued, a whisper, indistinct yet purposeful. He raised a finger for silence. "There," he murmured. "Do you hear it, Watson? The cadence is different. The first whisper was mechanical, controlled by valves and echo chambers. This is a living voice." I leaned close, my heart quickened. The sound was faint, a breath through metal, shaping syllables. Carter beneath. Then a pause, followed by a dull clatter as though something metallic struck the tube from far below. Holmes withdrew, his eyes narrowing. Someone else operates these conduits, someone who remains at liberty within the building. But who could know of such a system besides the headmaster? I asked. Precisely the question we must answer. Holmes's tone was clipped. Watson, take Miss Carter to the infirmary. Place her under watch and allow her no visitors save Mrs. Ellis. Then return with the constable I observed at the gate. I shall trace this second voice before it finds silence again. He turned toward the stair, and I knew better than to argue. Within minutes, I had secured Miss Carter safely in the infirmary, her pulse steady, though her lips still murmured fragments of verse poems she had once taught, mingled now with fear. The bell outside tolled for the midday recess, and children's laughter rose incongruously bright above the tension that gripped the school. Yet even among their cries, that small metallic jingle from Harold's satchel seemed to persist, echoing down every corridor. When I returned, Constable Briggs, a solid, honest fellow, accompanied me. We found Holmes in the basement corridor, where the heating pipes converged, his lantern balanced on a crate, his face illuminated by its amber glow. He greeted us without turning. Observe, gentlemen, each whispering tube descends to this central junction. There are valves here for direction, crude but functional. Someone down here can listen or speak to any room above. The constable frowned. You mean to say, sir, there's a hidden room beneath this school? Hidden, no. Forgotten, perhaps. The blueprints will tell us more, but the dust here is recently disturbed, and that soot mark Holmes pointed to a blackened circle on the wall suggests the flame of a lantern carried low by someone cautious enough to shield its light. He knelt, running his hand along the pipes until one diverged into a smaller aperture half concealed by crates. Watson, your medical hand will serve better than mine. Pry that aside, if you please. I shifted the boxes and exposed a narrow iron door, its hinges corroded but recently oiled. Holmes's nostrils flared. Our phantom listens from within. He pressed his ear to the seam. Faintly, very faintly came the murmur of movement, and then the unmistakable scrape of a chair. Holmes signaled Briggs, who readied his truncheon. Now, whispered Holmes. He turned the latch and pushed. The door gave way with a groan. Inside lay a small chamber lined with dusty bookshelves, a table, and at its center, a curious contrivance of pipes, mirrors, and coils. A thin man in a workman's garb sprang to his feet, eyes wide with terror. Stay where you are, said Holmes quietly. Constable, the door, if you please. The fellow froze. His face was gaunt, his hair matted with soot. A wrench hung from his belt beside a notebook bound in string. Holmes approached. Your name? Jory, sir. Thomas Jory. Maintenance engineer. Holmes nodded slowly. Indeed. You built the sound system. The man's lips trembled. On orders, sir. The headmaster said it was for discipline to make the boys behave. Just a few whispers, he said. But then he told me to alter it to make voices travel both ways. Said he'd pay extra if it frightened them proper. Holmes's tone softened, but only slightly. And when Miss Carter discovered the device, Jory's eyes darted toward the floor. He made me seal her in. I thought she was dead already. I swear I never meant harm. Holmes's expression did not change. And yet you remained. Why continue the whispers? The man swallowed. Because, sir, because they didn't stop. After she fell, I heard someone else speak through the tubes. Not him, not her, someone I never saw. I said my name, said Jory, confess. It's been speaking ever since. Briggs snorted. Ghost stories. Holmes turned the lantern toward the device. Not ghosts, Constable? Residual vibration, or... He stopped. No. Listen. We all heard a slow, rhythmic beat from within the pipes, like breathing turned to metal. Then, unmistakably, The voice again, Carter beneath Jory, dropped to his knees. "You hear it too? It knows when we listen." Holmes crouched beside the mechanism. His eyes darted across the valves and wires, tracing the logic of its construction. "Watson, note these copper filaments. They lead beyond the outer wall. This apparatus extends beneath the courtyard." "Then the whisper isn't confined to the building?" I said. "Exactly. Which means the architect of this scheme had greater purpose than simple coercion." He looked up sharply at Jory. "Who supplied the equipment?" The man hesitated. "A gentleman said he was an inspector from the Education Board. Gave me plans already drawn." "Paid in sovereigns?" Holmes's tone grew taut. "Did this inspector have a name?" "Only his card," said Mr. Fairfax. Holmes's brows lifted. "Fairfax? Curious. That name has already been whispered in another investigation, Watson. But this time it seems our Mr. Fairfax prefers anonymity." The bell rang again above us, 3 strokes, abrupt and hollow. The pipes shuddered as the sound poured through them, magnified until the entire chamber seemed to pulse with the rhythm. The boy's small bell, still in my pocket from earlier, began to tremble in sympathy, its faint chime answering the larger toll like a distant echo. Holmes rose, his voice low. "The system reacts to the main bell. Whoever built this calculated resonance, the whispers could be transmitted beyond the grounds, perhaps across the entire quarter." "To what end?" I asked. He turned toward the dark passage. "That, my dear Watson, is the question the whisper itself intends to answer." Before any of us could move, the pipes exhaled a sound unlike any we had heard, not words this time, but laughter. Faint, slow, mechanical laughter that rose and fell as though something unseen mocked our discovery. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The second listener, gentlemen, has heard us." Holmes did not move. The laughter coiled through the pipes with a metallic resonance that seemed to crawl beneath the skin. Jory hid his face in his hands, muttering prayers. The constable stood rigid, every muscle listening. I could feel the air tremble around us, a vibration more felt than heard, like the sound of fear itself. Holmes raised a hand. "Quiet. Let it finish." The laughter died abruptly, leaving behind a thin hiss of escaping air. Holmes bent close to the mechanism, eyes intent, and touched a copper valve. A faint spark jumped, followed by the smell of heated metal. "Watson," he said softly, "the system is alive because someone has supplied it with current. Look there, a thin wire runs behind the wall, insulated with tar. The power must originate elsewhere in the building." "Electricity?" I asked. "Crude, but serviceable. An induction coil. Someone very clever has transformed a school's plaything into a network of artificial ghosts." Jory shuddered. "I swear I never wired no current, sir. Only air tubes I did." Holmes nodded absently. "Then the one who did so remains free, and he listens even now." He turned one of the valves sharply. The whisper ceased at once. "That, gentlemen, should deprive him of hearing us for the moment. Constable Briggs, escort Mr. Jory upstairs and keep him under guard. Watson and I will trace the power source." Briggs obeyed without question. As their footsteps faded, Holmes motioned me toward a narrow conduit leading from the device. "Follow this wire, Watson. It disappears beneath that floorboard." I knelt and pried it loose. The wire ran between the stones, continuing toward a low passage half-choked with dust. Holmes took the lantern and ducked through. The air grew close, heavy with the scent of oil and iron. Each movement made the pipes hum faintly, the same ghostly rhythm that had haunted us from the first whisper. The passage opened into a small storeroom cluttered with crates marked educational supplies. Holmes brushed one aside, revealing a cabinet fitted with brass switches and a compact generator, humming faintly. "There," he murmured, "the heart of the whisper." He examined the device, tracing the lines with precision. "Note the workmanship, Watson, not the clumsy hand of Jory, but an engineer's precision. The current enters here, exits to each conduit. Whoever built this understood both mechanics and human psychology. A voice from nowhere can command more obedience than any teacher with a cane. He adjusted a switch, and for a moment, the faint sound of breathing filled the room again and echoed through the metal veins of the school. Then, layered beneath that breath, another tone emerged slower, deliberate, not human at all. "Holmes," I said. "That sounds like a signal," he interrupted. A rhythmic pulse. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. Familiar, is it not? I counted under my breath. The pattern of the school bell. Precisely. The system responds to the bell's vibration. Each toll activates transmission, and that means his face darkened with sudden insight. Whoever speaks through it must do so at the precise moment the bell rings, when the pupils are gathered and no one suspects. We stood listening to the low hum when a new sound entered, faint footsteps above. Then a heavier tread. Holmes tilted his head. We are no longer alone down here. He extinguished the lantern. The darkness pressed close, broken only by the tiny red glow of the generator. The footsteps descended the far stair. We waited, scarcely breathing. A shadow crossed the doorway. A match flared, revealing the sharp profile of a man in clerical attire, black coat, white collar, eyes bright with purpose. He saw us and froze. Then, with startling calm, he spoke. "I expected you sooner, Mr. Holmes." Holmes's voice was quiet. "And you are?" The man smiled thinly. "Reverend Fairfax, acting chaplain to this institution." The name struck me like a blow. Fairfax, the inspector's alias. Holmes stepped forward. "So the whisper has found its tongue." The clergyman inclined his head. "You give it poetry, sir. I prefer to call it an influence, a means of correction where sermons fail." The headmaster was weak. I merely improved his system. By terrorizing children. Holmes' tone was scathing. By driving a woman nearly to her death. Fairfax's gaze hardened. "Discipline, Mr. Holmes. The empire itself rests upon fear, properly directed. My apparatus made obedience visible, a whisper from conscience, so to speak." Holmes advanced another pace. "And the electricity? The hidden current? That was not conscience, but control." The Reverend's hand moved toward a lever on the cabinet. Truth must sometimes strike like thunder. Before he could act, Holmes lunged. The 2 men grappled in the dim light. The generator crackled, throwing blue sparks. I seized the lever before it could be pulled, and the hum of the pipes faltered. Holmes twisted Fairfax's wrist, sending the man sprawling against the wall, but even as he fell, the Reverend began to laugh, a deep, resonant sound that blended hideously with the fading echo from the conduits. "You cannot silence it, Holmes. It knows every word, every secret. It still listens." Holmes stood over him, breathing hard. "Then let us hear its last confession." He turned the final switch. A roar of feedback filled the chamber, the pipes vibrating until dust rained from the ceiling. The whisper erupted into a dozen voices, men, women, children, all overlapping in a cacophony of terror and plea. The noise built until it seemed the very walls would burst. "Watson, the main valve!" Holmes shouted. I turned it. The sound died instantly, leaving us deafened by silence. Only the faint jingle of the small bell from my pocket remained, trembling against the echo it could no longer find. Holmes straightened slowly. "The machine's memory," he said softly. "Recordings of every voice that passed through." He built not merely a whisper, but an archive of guilt. Fairfax slumped, defeated. "They would not confess their sins," he muttered. "So I made them hear them." Holmes regarded him with cold disdain. "You mistook God for acoustic, sir, and both will judge you." He signaled Briggs, who had arrived breathless at the doorway, to take the man away. The constable hauled him up the stairs, his laughter fading until only the generator's low sigh remained. Holmes looked at the silent pipes. "Watson, this building has heard enough. But mark me somewhere beyond, another bell will ring, and another whisper will answer." I pocketed the trembling bell, its faint chime subsiding as though soothed by his words. Then, from the far end of the corridor, something answered a single, delicate knock upon the metal, soft as breath, yet deliberate. Holmes froze, head tilted. "That, Watson," he said quietly, "was not an echo." The faint metallic echo of the bell still lingered in the passage, vibrating faintly through the floorboards, when Holmes gestured for silence. "Watson, every sound we hear here is a trace, a map left by intention rather than chance. Follow me closely." We crept along the narrow corridor, each footfall measured, the faint jingle of Harold's satchel still echoing from the stairwell above. Holmes's hand pressed against the wall, sliding along the cold iron of a concealed conduit. "Note, Watson, how the vibration diminishes slightly at regular intervals. This is a deliberate branching system, with valves and conduits leading to multiple chambers. Someone is orchestrating the whispers from within the building itself." I frowned. "You mean the system is active again, even after Fairfax and Latham were detained?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Precisely. A true architect leaves contingencies. Observe the dust upon this grate disturbed very recently. Our whisper is no longer confined to old cylinders. It has a live operator." A faint scraping sound came from below, soft but deliberate, almost a reply to our whispered observations. Holmes crouched, listening intently. "That, Watson, is the mark of someone unseen, moving with purpose beneath the floorboards." I peered into the darkness. Could it be another accomplice? Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. "Indeed. Fairfax and Latham provided the initial network, but a hidden conductor remains. Someone who knows these halls as well as the bell itself." He motioned me to a small hatch at the far end of the corridor, half hidden beneath dust and scattered crates. "This leads to the central junction. It is from here that the system may still be controlled." We descended carefully, the steps narrow and damp. The faint hum of residual electricity tickled the edges of perception, and every few paces the metallic jingle of the small bell echoed faintly in sync with distant vibrations. Holmes paused at a junction where several copper conduits converged. "Here," he whispered, "is the heart of the whisper network. The valves and pipes are arranged to allow simultaneous transmission and reception. Whoever controls this chamber can speak through any conduit at will." A sudden click made me start. A section of floorboards near the far wall had shifted slightly. Holmes pointed. "The operator is near. Stay alert." From beneath the boards, a muffled voice emerged. "It's useless. I know you're there." It was low, controlled, but unmistakably human. The pipes vibrated in accompaniment, as though the very structure were responding. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Not only does he observe, but he expects us. He knelt beside a valve hidden behind a crate. "Watson, watch closely. These small pressure differences indicate movement within the chamber beneath. Our friend believes he is concealed, yet he has left his signature on the system itself." The sound of a heavy boot against the hidden floor made my pulse quicken. "He's coming closer," I whispered. Holmes nodded. "And he will speak." He crouched beside me, ear near the floor. The faint echo repeated the voice, now louder and more urgent. "You should not have come." Holmes's expression was unreadable. "Observe, Watson. The variation in pitch indicates the operator's distance from the main valve. He cannot escape our reach." A figure emerged suddenly from beneath a panel, tall, lean, with eyes that darted nervously. It was the bursar, Jory's assistant, a man whose presence I had scarcely noted before. In his hands was a small brass mechanism connected to the remaining active pipes. Holmes spoke quietly but firmly. "Step aside. You cannot continue." The man hesitated, then lifted the device. "I only wanted to keep it alive," he said, "to hear the whispers myself. I never meant harm." Holmes advanced a step, hand on the man's shoulder. "Control does not absolve responsibility. You played with fear as though it were a toy." The man's hands shook, and the system produced a faint, distorted echo of his voice, repeating his own apology. The metallic tone carried through every pipe like a ghostly chorus, soft and mournful. Holmes observed the vibration, fingers tracing the layout of the valves. "See? Watson, even contrition, leaves an imprint. The network remembers everything it encounters." I shuddered. And yet he manipulated it, sent the voices through the school, and endangered the children. Holmes' lips pressed together. "Yes, but he did not anticipate the boy. The pure listener disrupts the pattern." He gestured toward the conduit. Harold's presence altered the flow, introducing a variable impossible to control. The system misread him, and that is why we found the bell still singing his name. A faint jingle from the satchel above echoed faintly through the walls. The boy had returned to the stairwell, perhaps drawn by the sound. Holmes looked toward it. He is the only one untouched by artifice. The final relay of the whisper. The man before us backed away, guilt and fear etched into every line of his face. "It isn't supposed to end this way. I thought I could control it forever." Holmes's eyes met mine, and therein lies the lesson. Intelligence, even of the mechanical sort, cannot dominate conscience. Listen closely. He pressed his ear to the main valve. The pipes vibrated one last time, producing a faint melody, a single note ascending and descending in rhythm with the residual hum of the bell. It was the sound motif we had followed from the start, now harmonized with the breath of the building itself. The man's device fell from his hands. The echo of it rattled through the conduits and ceased. Silence followed, punctuated only by the faint, trembling jingle from Harold's satchel, now still. Holmes rose slowly. The hidden conductor is no longer hidden, and the child Watson has restored balance. I took a deep breath. "So the system is silent?" Holmes nodded. "For now. But even in silence, the lesson remains. Every echo carries intent. The innocence of one can undo the designs of many." A faint creak above reminded us of the great bell, dormant yet still present, as though acknowledging its own submission. Holmes looked toward it and said softly, "The conduit sleeps. Let us hope it dreams well." Holmes had already turned toward the sound, his whole body still, every sense sharpened to a point. The knock again came, one precise tap on the metal conduit, followed by a long, deliberate silence. I held my breath. Holmes raised his hand, and with the faintest motion of his knuckle, he answered the signal one tap. "Nothing." Then two faint replies, exactly spaced. "It is code," he whispered. "But Morse is not Morse, too irregular. Someone improvises, perhaps by sound alone." "Who could remain down here?" I murmured. "Fairfax is under guard." Holmes's eyes flashed in the dim light. "Precisely why we must listen. There are accomplices still within these walls." He knelt by the pipe, ear pressed to the cold iron. "Watson, note the rhythm. 3. Pause. 1. It originates from the northern wing, near the old classrooms." He straightened. "That section was once part of a priory. The school built over it, if there is still access." A faint metallic creak interrupted him. The pipe vibrated, not from impact this time, but from air drawn sharply inward, the whisper reborn. Thames, it was not the cold mechanic rasp of the machine. It was soft, almost pleading. Holmes's expression darkened. That, Watson, was Miss Carter's voice. I stared in disbelief. Impossible. She's upstairs under guard. Then either our enemy imitates her or her message travels delayed through the system. Come quickly. He seized the lantern, and we hurried along the narrow passage toward the northern wing. The echo of our steps merged with the low hum of the dormant pipes, the bell tone pulsing faintly as though stirred from uneasy sleep. Each corner seemed to breathe. The small bell in my pocket quivered, ringing once like a heartbeat in reply. At the end of the corridor, we found an iron grate half buried in the wall. Holmes crouched, lantern close. Airflow. There's space behind this. He pressed on the edge. The grate shifted slightly, revealing a rough stair spiraling downward. "Watson," he said quietly, "you may wish you had stayed above ground, yet curiosity, like conscience, will not be silenced." "I follow you," I replied simply. We descended into a passage that smelled of damp and chalk. The whisper followed us like a memory of faint vowels, broken sighs. Holmes stopped suddenly and touched the wall. "Do you hear it now?" The voice changes with our movement. "It tracks us." "Tracks us?" I said. "Exactly. Someone listens and mirrors. Observe." He struck the pipe once. Instantly, a single note replied. He smiled grimly. Not an echo, a person. We advanced until the passage widened into a vaulted chamber. The ceiling curved like the nave of a small chapel, its stonework blackened with soot. In the center stood an enormous iron bell, long decommissioned, its surface etched with Latin script almost worn away. Around it, copper wires snaked like veins into the walls. Holmes's eyes gleamed. The original bell of the Priory. The whisper's source lies not in the machinery above, but here. The system feeds from this acoustic heart. As he spoke, the bell gave a sudden, almost imperceptible tremor. A note rose from within low, human, mournful. Holmes. It was unmistakably Miss Carter's voice again. Holmes moved closer, studying the wires. No human body here, no ventriloquist's trick. The sound travels through a resonant cavity beneath. She may be imprisoned below this floor. I knelt beside him. "We must free her." He nodded. Careful now. Each vibration might collapse the chamber. He ran his hand around the bell's rim, searching for an opening, then halted. "Watson, bring the lantern closer." On the stone base was a faint inscription recently carved with a knife. "She hears through silence." Holmes frowned. A warning or an instruction? Before I could answer, a shadow moved at the edge of the lantern light. A figure stepped from behind the column, tall, cloaked, face half covered by dust and soot. The voice that emerged was calm, almost reverent. "You shouldn't have come here, Mr. Holmes." Holmes did not turn his head. "I rarely obey that advice. You are the true architect, I presume." The man drew back his hood, revealing the ashen face of the school's bursar. Mr. Latham was a quiet man I'd barely noticed earlier that day. "Fairfax was the preacher," he said, "but I was the builder. You destroyed years of work, years devoted to frightening children," Holmes replied coldly. "To enlighten them," Latham snapped. "The whisper teaches obedience. The Empire needs it. I only improved the method." "And Miss Carter?" Holmes's voice hardened. Latham's hand tightened on a small brass controller connected by a cable to the bell's base. "She learned too much. I silenced her, or thought I had. But the system remembers voices. Once recorded, they never fade. She lives in its echoes now, warning you as she once warned me." Holmes stepped slowly between him and the bell. "You are wrong. No system breathes. You mistook conscience for machinery. The voice you hear belongs not to her spirit, but to your own guilt." Latham sneered. "You think to moralize, detective. Let us test your reason against faith." He pressed the lever. The bell roared. Sound exploded through the chamber, a single monstrous note that bent the air and threw us to our knees. The lantern shattered. Through the vibrating darkness, The whisper returned louder, frantic Miss Carter's voice rising to a cry. Holmes crawled toward the generator cable, shouting over the din. "Watson, the knife cut the current." I found it near my boot, seized the blade, and slashed the wire. A shower of sparks flared, then darkness consumed us again. The roar faded into a last trembling sigh from the bell. Holmes rose unsteadily. "He's gone," he murmured. The spot where Latham had stood was empty, the brass controller lying smoking on the stones. The bell glowed faintly red from heat. Then, from within its hollow came one final whisper, slow, distinct, deliberate. "Find the child." Holmes turned sharply. "Watson, do you recall the boy Harold Phipps?" "Yes, the messenger." His eyes blazed. "Then we have not yet heard the final voice of this school." Holmes's eyes had taken on that fierce inward light I knew so well the moment when deduction turned from intellect to destiny. The echo of the bell still trembled faintly in the air, as though the great iron heart had not yet surrendered its last beat. "Find the child," he repeated under his breath, as if translating from a language only he understood. "You believe Harold is in danger?" I asked. "In danger, or the key to the entire design?" He picked up a fallen length of copper wire, twisting it absently between his fingers. "Every voice we've heard was deliberate. Watson engineered, recorded, manipulated. But one voice has been truly innocent from the beginning, the boy's, and the system recognized it." I frowned. "Recognized?" He looked up sharply. "You recall the very first whisper he described came after the bell, never before. The machinery is activated by vibration, yet his account placed the whisper at a human interval, as though listening, responding. Someone or something responded to him. A shiver ran through me. "You think he unknowingly triggered it?" "Precisely. The boy has been the tuning fork of this entire affair." He began to pace, hands behind his back, each movement measured against the lingering resonance of the great bell. When Miss Carter vanished, he sought us, guided by instinct rather than reason. The whisper followed him here not because it haunted him, but because it needed him to hear. A faint clang interrupted us, distant, deliberate. Holmes turned toward the passage. "He is here." "What?" "Harold," he said. "He has returned to the building, and if my calculations are correct, he is no longer alone." We hurried from the chamber, the echo of our steps answering the dying bell. As we climbed, the metallic air seemed charged with unseen motion. Twice we paused to listen. Once we heard the child's bell, faint and uncertain. The second time, a low murmur like a lullaby sung through metal. When we reached the corridor above, lanterns flickered against the damp walls. The school was silent, even though the constables had retreated to the main hall. At the far end, by the broken cloakroom door, a small figure knelt beside the open grate. "Harold," I called. He turned, startled. His face was pale, his eyes distant as if he had been listening to something only he could hear. In his hands, he held a small brass horn, one of the portable listening cones from the mechanical network. "Mr. Holmes," he whispered. "It says my name." Holmes approached slowly. "Put it down, my boy." "I can't," he said. "It says it needs me." Holmes crouched before him, voice low and steady. "Tell me exactly what you heard." The whisper said the others were gone. It said only I could make the bell quiet again. He hesitated. "It said you would try to stop me." Holmes's expression softened. "I'm trying to save you, Harold. That voice is not your friend. It is the echo of men who used fear as a tool. It repeats what it was taught, nothing more." The boy shook his head. "No, sir. It knows things it shouldn't. It said Miss Carter used to write poems she never showed anyone. Then it said one word for word." His eyes filled. "I can't know that unless she's still speaking." Holmes's brow furrowed. Watson, observing the mechanism, has transcended its creators. It repeats, recombines, and now invents. It has become a living labyrinth of sound. Holmes, I said quietly, are you suggesting the system itself has learned to speak? He looked at me gravely. Not in the human sense, but as an echo shaped by countless impressions, a ghost not of flesh, but of memory. And like all ghosts, it seeks release. Before I could reply, a low vibration spread through the floorboards. The pipes along the wall began to hum softly. The whisper returned, not as words this time, but as a clear musical tone, a single, sustained note that made the brass horn in Harold's hands tremble. Holmes's eyes darted to the ceiling. The bell is waking again, and our boy is its conductor. He reached for the horn, but Harold clutched it to his chest. It says, "If I go to the tower, it will stop." Holmes's voice sharpened. "No, Harold. That is how it claims its listeners by promising silence. You must resist it." The boy's gaze turned glassy. "It's not bad, sir. It's just lonely." Before we could stop him, he darted down the corridor, the brass horn pressed to his ear, the faint jingle of his satchel echoing like a tragic refrain. Holmes and I gave chase. The sound guided us, chime, footstep, whisper weaving upward through the stairwell toward the tower. "Watson," Holmes called, breath controlled despite the climb. "Remember what Miss Carter's note said, 'The whisper knows who listens.' It has recognized him as the only innocent witness. It seeks to bind itself to him to continue." We burst into the bell chamber. The rope hung motionless, the air dense with the scent of burnt copper. Harold stood beside the great bell, eyes closed, the horn lifted like a relic. The single note still pulsed through the chamber, impossibly sustained. Holmes advanced quietly. "Harold," he said, "I know it speaks kindly, but it speaks lies. You must drop that device." The boy did not move. "It says it can make her come back." Holmes stopped. "Miss Carter lives, Harold. You saw her and I took you to her bedside." His voice trembled. "It says that wasn't her." A sudden metallic crack echoed through the pipes, and one of the copper lines split, releasing a burst of white steam. The bell quivered, answering the noise like a beast disturbed from slumber. Holmes turned to me, his face pale but controlled. "Watson, the vibration is self-sustaining now. The system's feedback will destroy the structure if not halted. We must sever its link to the child." He moved toward the base of the bell, searching for the power conduit. "When I signal, cut the main wire. It runs behind the stairs." Another burst of noise drowned his words. The boy cried out as the horn glowed faintly red. The whisper turned harsh, furious, incomprehensible, a storm of voices overlapping in chaos. Holmes shouted over it. "Now, Watson!" I tore the cable free. Sparks leapt across the floor. The horn shattered in Harold's hands, and the great bell gave one final, hollow toll before silence fell. Holmes caught the boy as he sagged, unconscious but unharmed. The faint jingle from the satchel sounded once, twice, then ceased. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then Holmes looked toward the bell, its surface now cool and lifeless. "The child did not just hear the whisper," he said quietly. He ended it. A faint creak from above drew our gaze. A rope swayed gently in the darkness, though no wind stirred the air. One last sound followed, soft, uncertain, like a breath between words. A whisper beginning again. Holmes's eyes never left the rope as it swayed in that breathless stillness. The whisper came again, softer than before, no more than the tremor of a sight unmistakable. "Holmes." It hung between us, uncertain whether to plead or accuse. Holmes tilted his head, as though listening for the thought behind the sound. "Watson," he said quietly, "do you perceive it? The tone has changed. It is no longer mechanical. This is residual resonance stored vibration within the metal itself. I looked at him in disbelief. You mean the bell remembers? In a sense. Sound leaves its ghost, particularly in metal structures of this density. But this has intelligence in its echo. He stepped closer, fingers brushing the cold surface. A final attempt to communicate before silence claims it. The boy stirred in my arms. Is it gone, Mr. Holmes? Almost, he replied. And yet, as with all things that listen too long, it repeats what it has heard. He crouched beside Harold. My boy, what did the whisper promise you? Harold's voice came faintly. It said it wanted to be free. Holmes's brows knitted. Free. A curious word for a sound. He rose abruptly. Watson, help me examine the underside of this chamber. There is one element that still troubles me. The origin of the first whisper, the one that summoned the boy to Baker Street. We laid Harold gently on a bench and set about inspecting the flooring beneath the bell. Holmes traced a crack that ran diagonally across the stone, pausing at an iron plate half concealed by dust. There. A trap-door, one we overlooked in the confusion. With some effort, we pried it open. A chill draught rose from the darkness below. Holmes lowered the lantern, and its glow revealed another passage descending sharply into the foundations of the school. So the bell was not the final layer, he murmured. The whisper's heart lies deeper still. The boy tried to sit up. Please don't go, sir. It's waiting down there. Holmes gave him a reassuring look, which is precisely why we must. He turned to me. Watson, if the voices above were merely echoes, something or someone beneath to sustain them. I followed him into the descent. The steps were narrow and wet. Every few yards, the faint chime from Harold's satchel bell could be heard above us, like a heartbeat marking the distance we left behind. Holmes carried the lantern low, its light catching damp stone and twisted copper conduits that pulsed faintly with leftover charge. After several turns, the stair opened into a circular vault. The walls were lined with metal sheets, curved inward, amplifying every breath. At the center stood a small rusted table upon which lay a recording cylinder, its wax surface glistening in the dim light. Holmes exhaled slowly. Edison's phonographic cousin, he said. An experimental model by the look of it. So that is how they captured and replayed the whispers. He approached the device, turning the handle with delicate precision. The cylinder revolved once, twice, then emitted a faint crackle followed by a voice Miss Carter's, unmistakably clear. If anyone hears this, it's the boy they want. Not me. The boy. Holmes's hand froze. Watson, it seems our friend Fairfax's crusade had an unacknowledged sponsor. The recording continued, faltering. The whisper told him secrets from the pupils' confessions. It spoke names no child could have known. Someone feeds it information, someone who, a burst of static, swallowed the rest. Holmes's face had taken on that grim stillness which presaged revelation. Information, of course. The school records, the parents, the officials are all accessible to the bursar and his associates. They gathered private data, turned it into whispers of guilt and punishment, and the children obeyed. And Harold? I asked. He turned sharply. An anomaly. He heard more than he was meant to, perhaps because of his musical air, perhaps simple purity of perception. Whatever the reason, the system misjudged him. It chose him to carry its last confession. He examined the cylinder again. Beneath it lay a second reel, newly etched. This one has yet to be played, he said, and it hums. He touched it lightly and the metal was warm. It's recording us even now. I reached for the switch, but Holmes stopped me. No, let it finish. We may learn who still listens. The machine clicked, then emitted a single tone, 3 notes rising and falling in the same pattern as the school bell. Then came a male voice, calm and unhurried. "Mr. Holmes, you have silenced one whisper, but not the source. The true choir waits beyond London. When the next bell rings, we shall speak again." The cylinder stopped. The silence that followed was profound. Holmes straightened slowly, the faint light glinting off his profile. "Watson," he said, "do you understand what this implies? This school was a prototype. Someone means to replicate the experiment." My heart sank. Good heavens. "Where?" He turned toward the stairs. "Wherever children are taught to obey before they are taught to think." We ascended swiftly, carrying the cylinders with us. Harold met us halfway, pale but determined. "It spoke again," he whispered. "It said to tell you it's sorry." Holmes regarded him gently. "Then even an echo may repent. That is something, at least." We emerged into the tower just as dawn light crept through the misted panes. The bell stood silent now, its cracked surface dull and inert. Holmes placed a hand upon it. "You have sung your last song, old friend," he murmured. "Let silence be your atonement." As we prepared to leave, a constable appeared at the door. "Mr. Holmes, the Reverend Fairfax wishes to speak with you before he's taken away." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "Bring him here," he said. Moments later, Fairfax was led in, wrists bound but demeanor unchanged. He gazed up at the bell with something like reverence. "You've broken the instrument," he said softly, "but not the faith." Holmes's tone was cold. "Faith founded on fear is merely obedience to emptiness. Tell me, Fairfax, who funds your ministry of silence?" The Reverend smiled faintly. "You'll know when you hear the next bell." Holmes stepped closer. "And where will that be?" Fairfax's eyes gleamed. "You've already been invited." At that, the tower rope shifted once more, without touch or wind. The bell gave a faint, hollow murmur, not a toll, but something between breath and word. Holmes turned sharply toward it, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Watson, did you hear that?" I nodded, throat tight. It said a name. "Yes," Holmes whispered. "Yours." For a long moment I could not speak. The bell's faint murmur still lingered in the cold air like a pulse beneath silence. "It said my name," I whispered at last, half to myself. Holmes's eyes flicked toward me, sharp but unreadable. "So it would seem. The whisper, my dear Watson, has taken a personal interest." Fairfax smiled through cracked lips. "You see now, Doctor, it knows the listeners by heart. You fed it yourself, all those hours of retelling his triumphs to the world. The voice you gave him has learned yours.